Hey guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today we have a Q&A with Dr. Mike Israetel. We dig into things like why you don't want to limit your exercise variations needlessly, a little bit about biomechanics and that sort of thing, and we also dig into some of the psychology behind kind of being obsessive about macro counting and hitting training sessions, but maybe missing social events, and how maybe you want to balance that within your life. As a reminder, guys, if you want your questions asked to Dr. Mike, be sure to be following me over on Instagram because that's where I collect questions at Revive Stronger. And you can follow the rest of the team there as well. I highly recommend it. And without further ado, let's get into the show today. Cheers. Hi guys, welcome to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I have Dr. Mike back on the show for a Q&A. How's it going, Mike? Did you just finish your training?
Good. Yes.
Where are you? What phase are you in right now? Still massing, moving up?
Last 2 weeks of massing. I weighed like 252 2 days ago. So just trying to stay above 250 for these 2 weeks and eat well and train hard. My desire to train is like almost zero at this point. I'm quite overreached. But then I get 2 weeks of active rest, a nice long 8-week, you could call it mini cut, but really it's a regular cut. And kind of floating back down to a light body weight, and then I'm going to mass up the rest of the winter, and then in the spring I begin dieting for a show in July.
Amazing. That's exciting. I know people want to see you bring something even like especially the last 2 seasons, like you really leveled up, and then you can like you even beat that one. So I know this next one is going to be even better. So
I'll be trying.
We're going to be excited to see that. And so let's get into some questions. Actually, one of the questions I had is a selfish one, because I recently posted up, it was like the super arm laterals. And I had some arguments, which I think made a lot of sense in many ways, but I also know from performing both exercises that they feel inherently different when you do them. And like the pump, the disruption, those sort of elements that we take notice of for stimulus feel very different. And it was essentially when you come kind of above up this sort of position, there's no tension like on the delts at that point. And at the bottom, like there's no tension. But when I do it, like it doesn't feel like there's zero tension when I go to start, and especially if I don't like rest at the bottom and I come and there's almost some tension being generated through that motion somehow. I can't explain it. And they were arguing, oh, you should just do it with cables, and there's no point ever using dumbbells for lateral raises. Or at least that's the feeling it kind of came across in that way. And I don't know if there's a way to explain. I was like, do both in the gym. They do not feel the same. You can't kind of get the exact replica of cables that the dumbbells are providing, especially through that like overloaded eccentric as you kind of really control it down.
Yes. So I had a video that we posted on the RP YouTube channel a little while ago, and it was basically a video of a hypothesis that I have that machines, because they have a certain degree of friction, actually interfere with hypertrophy a little bit based on what they could hypothetically do, because the way friction works in a machine is it adds to the resistance on the concentric, but it reduces the resistance on the eccentric, because in the eccentric, the friction works on your behalf. The concentric works against you. So what ends up happening, and there's a few other reasons for this, but what ends up happening is for any number of reps or sets, whatever load that you can take to failure or close, you get a fractionally smaller eccentric stimulus and a fractionally larger concentric stimulus, which is probably just about backwards to how you would want ideal training to go. Ideal training, we have good theoretical reason to believe is there is a decent chance that it is even concentric and eccentric loading. There is another equally good chance, I would say at this point, that slight eccentric bias is even better, with a little bit of a debiasing away from concentric. But I don't think anybody really has a decent hypothesis based on our understanding that's worth any merit that says that, well, a concentrically biased movement is a really good idea. And eccentric, if you can unload the eccentric, that's great. I mean, gee whiz, yeah, it's wrong from all sorts of perspectives. So what ends up happening is, by that heuristic, assuming that's true, which is an assumption, it's a hypothesis, maybe free weights have a category of superiority, all other things being equal, than cables and other machines, of course. Some of this is observable directly. This is, I think, what can be attributed to the phenomenon of people saying free weights just have they just fuck me up in a way that just nothing else does. Your body, free squats with a barbell, just, man, they toast your quads like per set. Even machines seem to not be able to do. Barbell bench presses, dumbbell press. I mean, they just blow up your shit. If they're a really good machine, do the same thing to you. So by a small margin, I think machines are inferior because of that problem. Now, by a small margin, in other ways, machines can be superior. Yes, cables offer tension at the bottom of the range of motion and also at the top. They offer relatively even tension throughout. So that's good. They can offer you more tension where you need it best. I think based on those two things canceling each other out roughly, we're back to both of them are fine exercises to use in a periodized manner. Another problem, I swear to God, most people just unaware of. And I will say that this is a problem that I'm not upset at people having when they're just in the fitness industry as consumers, because they're not supposed to know this. But people who call themselves producers in the fitness industry should know better than this. Sometimes they don't. The quest for the optimal exercise is always and everywhere a terrible idea for one really simple reason. You can't just do the same exercise over and over for a long time. It gets stale for a variety of different reasons. So you have to have what I call a top SFR candidacy list, exercise to give you the top stimulus to fatigue ratio. There should be a few of them. I would say that if you're training delts 2 or 3 times a week, each one of those should, or each other one should at least have different exercise involved. So that means in any mesocycle, you should use at least 2 delt exercises. I would be surprised if someone used just one. Can you imagine one delt exercise that you do in different rep ranges throughout the week? That's a recipe for real staleness. Not even staleness that you can sustain for a mesocycle. After 3 weeks, you'd be like, I'm done doing this. This is stupid, and my elbow hurts. So being that you need at least two delt exercises at a time in a meso, being that there are generally 3 mesocycles in a progression block, and some of these exercises lose their, they start to get, other exercises start to be better on SFR than them within a meso or 2, that means realistically you need maybe 5 or 6 side delt exercises that are real good hitters. And that's not even talking about some exercises become prohibitive due to nagging injuries. I've been in a place where like I couldn't do a variety of dumbbell moves because my elbows hurt for unrelated reasons. Or one of my shoulders is clicking funny on cables and I can't do cables. Like I had a thing where I couldn't do regular cable laterals facing the machine for like months and I had to do other stuff. And if I had said, okay, there's this one optimal cable exercise from diagrammatical biomechanics analysis, and I'm only going to do this exercise and I'm not even going to consider other exercises because they're so bad, hypothetically or theoretically, that what ends up happening is if I get staleness on that exercise, I don't know what to do because I didn't have any other exercises that I thought were any good. And we can actually circle around this completely and do an SFR just proxy measure of how much tension in the target muscle, how much burn, how much disruption, how much soreness, how much pump versus how much joint connective tissue fatigue. And we can reasonably figure that there will be a fraction of the population that likes regular laterals are great SFR, super ROM laterals are great SFR, cable laterals are great SFR. And if one of those is not great SFR, then you don't ever have to do it. But the thing is that you have a lot of these Instagram pages with biomechanist people that, almost never educated biomechanists, which is okay. You can, stuff without a formal degree, but they just make a lot of mistakes, such as this one, such as not hypothesizing that the search for the optimal exercise is already stupid. And we should be doing is searching for like 5 exercises that are really good, and making sure that they're considerably varied from one another so that they don't present a staleness problem. So if I told you all the best exercises, squat, front squat, close stance squat, and low bar squat, as soon as you were out of squatting for whatever back reason, I'm like, I ain't got nothing for you. That's ridiculous, right? So we've been pounding away in the evidence-based side of the fitness industry for years, trying to get people to understand that there is no perfect exercise. They're usually a combination of exercises because you have to fill the volume somehow. Due to staleness, you probably won't fill the volume of 10 sets per session with the same exercise. So what you'll probably end up having to do is choose multiple exercises anyway. You might as well choose ones that are complementary, but high SFR. Like some of the delt exercises really hit you at the bottom of the delt, some around super full range of motion and everything in between. And thus, you don't even have to choose the optimal exercise. You can have some exercises that, hit some parts of the muscle more than others. That's really good to have around, but you're also not always trying to hit that part of the muscle the most. For example, like people talk about the lower lats as this big thing. Yeah, lower lats can give you a cool pop. But if you don't have a lot of upper outer lats, it's going to be like your physique begins to look like a V taper and then never does. So what about upper lat exercises? Well, right now, people aren't talking about them because they're doing this cast bullshit. It's maybe a fine exercise. Although in biomechanical grounds, it doesn't even stretch your lat. So already not the most amazing thing I've ever seen. But there are people like Kaz who I think on his best days throw out this exercise and say it's a great exercise. You should try it for lower lats. That's probably true. There are other people who say, here's all these other exercises, they're suboptimal. And I think it's a fucking clown show. And I think that there's people just haven't thought it all the way through. And that's okay. Maybe they thought it as through as they could, and they're putting up content on their Instas and stuff that says, hey, this is my best assessment of the situation. I'm just here to respond charitably and say, I hear that best assessment, but I think that best assessment is incomplete. And I think that variation with high SFR exercises means that there are lots of winner exercises at the top of the leaderboard and not one optimal thing. I think it's almost the same fallacy as gurus on YouTube in the nutrition space talking about bad foods and good foods and the optimal, the biggest superfood. Like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? Lots of foods are great in complementary ways. Because you will always eat many different types of foods, you will need to think about what are the best foods, not the best food, because that's a false category. It's almost like, I've been watching a lot of The Boys recently. It's almost like investing all of your resources, if you're Vought, into the Homelander, and then he just gets killed. And you're like, we literally don't have any other superheroes. Sure. Well, yeah, it looks like he can lose his powers, so then he can summarily die right after. But let's say somehow we develop some kind of nuclear laser that kills him instantly. Okay. That's your whole defense system is based on that one guy. You're fucking done. And the same idea happens when you have an injury that prohibits you from doing the cable lateral raise with one arm, standing off to the side of a machine. It just hurts my shoulder. I don't even fucking know why. So now what? So now all the other exercises were bad. I just have one exercise. Also, what does that program look like that just has the optimal exercise? You don't train your delts. I know that on an Instagram video, you train your delts once and you don't even really train them hard. You just go through the motion for the video and you go, check that out. It's like the Doug Bergnoli 20 exercises. Motherfucker, you ain't never going to do 20 exercises your whole life. That's nonsense. Tell me you don't train without telling me you don't train. And by training, I mean follow the training process. Hard sequence training over and over, dealing with the real world of injuries and the real world of stainless. You're going to have multiple selections. So is the cable lateral raise thing good? Yes. Is it categorically superior? No, at least because of the friction thing and many other reasons. And a super arm laterals, a great tool. If you don't think so, no problem. Never do it. But if you try it, you'll almost certainly be one of those people that goes, holy shit, this is an incredible delt. It burns my delts off the bone. It doesn't hurt my joints at all. I love that I have to use less weight. It's awesome. And if you don't think it's awesome, please try to improve it. And if your attempt to improve it just turns it into another old exercise that we already have, we'll just don't go above here. By the way, the tension loss above here is just, it's mystical nonsense. How the hell do you think your arm keeps moving that way? If we chemically silence your side delts, you'd be a lot harder because they do absolutely contribute. And also, a lot of those people are like, well, it hits my traps. You don't have big traps, motherfucker. You got nothing to worry about. You're not Tom Hardy. So it's like people who are saying, you imagine girls saying, well, these squats just hit my glutes more. Yeah. And that means you can throw away some of the other dumbass exercises you use for glutes. Like if I ever see a guy doing regular lateral raises and then barbell shrugs and they're like, bro, there's one exercise you could do that hits both of those just the same. Nah. So in any case, I think a lot of this is just a mythical quest for the optimal optimum and not understanding that optimum really is a matter of top tier choices and not a matter of categories of this is the best and everything else follows afterward.
I think it's frustrating, at least from my perspective, because I think it is leading people down to that. Like people always argued against that, like PubMed warrior and that textbook warrior. It's just leading people down this rabbit hole of kind of just looking at functional anatomy and biomechanics in that sense. And they're forgetting what actually happens in the gym. That's why, like, my initial response was like, have you tried cables versus doing it this way? Because if you have, it doesn't feel the same. Like they're just practical experience tells you that. And it's infuriating then to have people limit their choices. And like you said, I think that is a sign of how many people have you trained for how long, because you'll see so many different individual differences to how things feel. Like the thing that's perfect in the textbook isn't necessarily going to apply perfectly, like you said, for you. Like you're getting pain with that exercise. It's like, oh, now what can we do?
Well, I've never read that. I've co-authored a bunch of textbooks. I've never read one that says that exercise is perfect. You know what I mean? But even they say, we cut these people too much slack. We call them PubMed warriors, nothing good at PubMed. We call them biomechanists, except none of them is a degreed biomechanist. We call them textbook people because they're smarter than the average Joe. They're not writing textbooks, and none of the shit is in a textbook. And actually in a textbook, it says to do exercise variation for a couple of very good reasons. So they're like nerds, not at the top of the hierarchy of nerds, which means they can catch a lot of people beneath them and make it seem like they're smart and they have it all figured out together, but they've missed a couple of bigger pieces of the puzzle. And ideally they should be consuming the content from people above them in the hierarchy, like going on like Eric Trexler and Greg Knuckles bullshit, and going on Eric Helms bullshit and Brad Schoenfeld and Alan Aragon, all those other guys who have just thought through these problems with a lot more completeness of thought. And then going back and checking the logic and be like, maybe I can caricature this as this, maybe these other exercises may be good, but they have some downsides. Here, consider some downsides of these traditional exercises. And also, here's an exercise like cable lateral bullshit or whatever that has all these great upsides. And I know it has downsides too, and maybe it's not the optimal, but maybe it's a great choice that you can try. Then after a while, a bunch of people try it and a bunch of people keep it. And at worst case, it's just a shitty exercise and nobody ever uses it after it gets us 2 months of popularity. Good case, probable case is that it gets to be one of those top 10 exercises in the world for training your delts, and that's always in the rotation at gyms around the world. You see it. And if people don't know it, you say, hey, I've got this idea. Have you ever tried this? Wow, it actually feels really good. Ideally, it is one of the exercises that just universally considered like top 2, like squats and leg presses for quads. Like it just has like a mythical status because it's that good, but it has to earn its status of being that good based on the stimulus proxies and the fatigue proxies. Like people are just getting unreal pumps and all this other crazy shit from it, and it's basically not hurting anyone's joints, relatively speaking. Amazing. But then you don't have to convince anyone to use it. After a while, it's just become pretty fucking obvious. Like anyone I've ever shown super ROM laterals to, 1 person out of 10 will be like, fuck that. I hate weird in my joints. I hate it. Don't do it. That's cool. No worries. And the 9 other people are like, this is unbelievable. I can't wait to add this exercise to my repertoire. And it's like, sweet. Yeah, there you go. So I think maybe a little bit less of these are bad exercises. This is the one good exercise, and a little bit more of, hey, I have an idea about, hey, this is another potentially really good exercise I figured out. So.
Yeah. Very well said, Mike. I appreciate that. And then my other selfish question was, I saw you recently got I don't know if it's called a lying hack or a lying leg press in your gym. Like that's I think the latest piece of equipment you got. Is that right?
Yeah, the Atlantis leg thing. Selectorized leg machine.
Have you used that before? A lot.
I've used a non-Atlantis version. It's almost the identical machine made by somebody else.
They feel very different to, like, it obviously looks like a hack squat, but it's lying down versus obviously way more upright. But do you just find, there's one in my gym and I can use way more weight on it. I'm not entirely sure why. Like I can virtually max it out and do stupid reps on it. I probably need to add some more to it. It's not me. It's just I don't know, however it's set up. Yeah, everyone's super strong on that machine. But it just feels so much different. I imagine that's because you're lying flat versus I'm guessing the more upright you are, the less load you can use, more gravity, whereas lying flat, just the resistance feels way different.
That's definitely one of them. Another thing is that the cable movement and the friction and the selectorized stack makes the feel of the machine different in general, concentric, eccentric, isometric. So at the end of the day, it changes a lot of variables. And that's one of those things that can potentially inject a lot of great variation into a program. You use regular hack squats, regular leg presses, squats for a while. Those can all get stale. And then you can do, that machine and it feels different, and psychologically it's great, and physiologically it checks some different boxes and advances other parts of your muscles that maybe some machine you were using didn't. And then you just trade it in and trade it out whenever you feel ready. I actually have a pendulum squat from Arsenal at my gym, and I don't love the machine. It actually preferentially stimulates the top part of the movement versus the bottom, which I think is suboptimal for hypertrophy. But for months, I was using it as my second leg day machine for quads because I had great quad movements. They got my quads are really sore and fucked up. And the first day and then the second day, I had this machine. It actually, because it emphasized the top so much, it helped me control my eccentrics like crazy on the way down, because on that machine, it'll just slam you straight down. you have to start from the very top, then you unlock your knees. You have to start slowing it down like nuts. That crazy eccentric stimulus was so novel and so different. And also the load at the bottom was so light that it was really easy on my knees and my shins. I don't know if you've ever been in this position before, but if you do a lot of loading at the bottom, very heavy on legs, sometimes your shins can start chronically aching. There's actually bone deformation there, and you have to like back off and heal it up a little bit. Yeah. So that machine was excellent for me, even though it was not remotely in my top 5 go-to quad machines. Just for variation alone, it was a huge winner. And the people who are against variation in training, 9 times out of 10, they just don't actually train consistently. Because if you train consistently, you instantly realize, oh shit, I'm stale on all these movements. I got to try something else. And then if you have another movement, it seems great. Now, there's such a thing as too much variation. Then you're varying on very poor SFR movements. But I would say, 5 to 8 exercises per muscle group to have in your bag of tricks as top SFR movements. Some of them pretty different from one another. Because, for example, let's say your machines all hit your adductors pretty hard, except for 1 or 2 machines. And over a while, your adductors are just taking so much beating and so much pain. They're under recovering. You could push your quads harder, but your adductors are preventing it. It's great to have those other machines around so that you can lay off your adductors for a while, let them heal, really deeply recover while you pound the shit out of your quads. It's a great thing. So that variation really can help. So what I'd say about that last machine, it's a fine machine. If I had to choose between that machine and a regular hack squat or that machine and a regular leg press, I throw that machine away immediately. But I don't, because I have a few pieces of equipment at the gym, and thus it's a great choice, one of the many great choices in a properly varied program. And I think it can stay for that reason. So almost the similar idea as with the lateral raises versus cable stuff.
Yeah. Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
I think that's a really great explanation of why variation is so helpful. And the fallacy of, again, just seeking just the optimal movements or machines or what have you is like, that's just a fallacy in its own right. Because like you said, it's like the good and bad foods. You're not looking for the good or bad foods. You're looking for the overall kind of good diet, as it were. And it's the same with the entire program. And so you can make it up of lots of variations. So that's cool. The only other question I had on that, I found failure on that, or like 0 to 1 RAR, just hell. Like it was just like my concentric speed it didn't feel like it really changed, and my quads just is such a different stimulus to the kind of incline hack.
That's awesome. Yeah, for me that machine is like I know when I start doing it, it's just a lot of burning quad pain for me. It doesn't crush my spine. It doesn't feel like I'm going to get hurt, which is cool. But then the other downside, quote unquote, like you pay somehow. Right? Like it's easy to zap your quads with minimal pain in a hack squat, but if the thing feels heavy as fuck and it's crushing you, this thing, you got to really work to zap your quads, and then they hurt for a long time during the set and after the set, but your joints feel super great because it's actually not that much crushing on your joints. So it's kind of, pluses and minuses. Quad pain is, man, it's such a terrible breed. One of our friends, and she was just here for some videos. She's like, it's like somebody's pouring hot water on your legs the entire time, and you control the spigot, and someone says 3 reps. That just means you need to pour more hot water on your legs. You have to be the person to turn it. It's tough. Some muscles just burn worse than others. Biceps, quads, they burn like crazy. Pecs, I don't know. They burn a little bit, and then you're done with a set, and they feel fine. Back, lats never burn that much. So you get, and then the muscles that are easier to hit kind of just means you can put a lot of pain into them very quickly. So there's something to that.
Your description of the difference between the two is exactly how I would describe it. It's like pick your poison, because both eventually suck in some sort of way. So the next question we have is, or rather one that isn't my question, was does the position you put your legs on the leg press make a difference, or is it all about just reaching full range of motion?
Well, full range of motion in what joint? If you put your legs up really high, you can have a lot of range of motion demonstrated in the hip joint and not as much in the knee joint. That's pretty good if you want to train your glutes. Not so great if you want to train your quads. If you put your feet lower on the leg press, then you can get a lot of movement in your knee joint and potentially just about the same or even less in the hip joint. and that's maybe a bit more quad centric. So what I would say is, if the leg press, almost always the way I program it is for quads. So I'd say is get your legs as low on the platform as two things can allow. One, your heels still touch the platform at the bottom of the lift and you can still generate force. And two, your knees feel okay. That doesn't have to be great because your knees get used to stuff, but your knees don't feel like they're just going to blow up. So that's probably my ideal position, vertically on the leg press is as low as possible for your heels to press and your knees to be fine. That biases the quads the most. Are there other ways of leg pressing? Sure. Are they good in some context? Sure. As far as narrow or wide, I mean, it really doesn't usually hit your adductors much more if you go wide. Sometimes it does if you're stretching them a lot, but many people can go relatively narrow or wide. And it's just like an interesting variation that probably just mildly engages different groups or parts of a muscle and no huge difference. So I'd say for those purposes, you can go wider or narrow if you want, but the vertical component is, if someone said to me, I like to put my legs even higher than what you're saying, I would go back to their SFR for quads and see which one gives you the best SFR. Because if the low one doesn't really produce a lot of force, you don't feel as stable. Yes, your knees don't hurt, but they don't feel great. And all of a sudden you can't get as good of a tension development in your quads, as good of a burn, as good of a pump, etc. Then yeah, you should put your feet higher. But I would say that start at that low position and then work out from there. And you often come back to that very lowest position is probably the best way to do it. There are not a ton of sort of guaranteed or very nearly guaranteed technique check boxes that you can check and say, this is almost certainly a good idea here. But there are some, and we should use as many of them as possible. Like going back to the earlier me ragging on the quote unquote biomechanists, is that sometimes they have very good things to say about this technique is really actually mechanically probably close to optimal because of XYZ. It just so happens that they miss a couple of those XYZs, and a couple of the ones they insert are not logical. So that's the problem. So I think that there logically can be exercise delineations that say, well, if you do it this way, it'd probably just be worse versus if you do it, some other way. Like if you're trying to hit your side delts, but you're raising the dumbbells up like this, thumb up, that's going to be a lot of front delt. There's not really a way to argue that. So there are, if you're doing leg press for the quads, low and in a comfortable position for your quads, as far as wide or narrow, is probably the best answer in most cases. And you sort of start and work from there. And any deviation from that low position out of leg press should be based on compelling reasons of something like, my SFR is just way better. And then, hey, great, that sounds good.
Yeah, I think that I really appreciate from you, because that's always been my kind of way of diagnosing things, is like start with the principles of movement for the exercise that makes like logical sense, but then don't ignore that individual's response. And that seems to be the bit that I see lost by some of the people kind of talking about biomechanics, is they ignore the individual response. Whereas no, you have to put your feet like this and do it like this because that's what like how it has to be done. But like you said, the person might feel a bit better, like narrower, wider, or slightly changing that position, and that's a great feedback tool. So yeah, I like that. Next question. Completely different kind of topic. Any research to support dieting being easier during spring/summer? They're saying they have a much easier time dieting during that time versus winter.
I haven't looked at that research directly. It might exist. Hypothetically, it makes a lot of sense because when in warmer temperatures, your appetite typically doesn't upregulate as much. In colder temperatures, you get there's an effect in water called the cold water effect, which after you get out of cold water, your hunger ramps up a lot more than if you get out of warm water. But I think that effect probably is the case. Just any kind of cold exposure makes you hungrier. Winter has been a time of conservation of as much body mass as possible, typically, and for a lot of humans ancestrally, especially folks, Asians and Caucasians that have evolved with the real winter. Because if you're African ancestry, winter means something a little different biologically to you. But a lot of times Africans are even worse at handling the cold. When it gets cold, they're like, fuck, this sucks on every possible level. And everyone else is like, yes, we agree, this blows, the cold sucks. So at the end of the day, I think there are other sociological reasons. Like you're covered up in the winter. and it's easy to be a little fluffier, and it's okay. In the summer, you're supposed to be frolicking around and etc. To me, the thing is a little backwards though, because cutting during summer is easier in the sense that if like you don't get as hungry, it's really hot, but also like you miss out on all the summer fun because you're dieting through it. Dieting during winter sucks because it's cold and it's annoying and you don't even get to show off your gains. But at the same time, you have that like there's nothing fun going on. I'm just going to hunker down and do this, which makes it much easier. So I actually think it's probably best if the season thing matters to you a lot, that I would say dieting to get really lean through most of spring is a good idea. So that as the spring gets warmer and warmer and turns into summer, your diet is hitting its hardest parts yet. And then it's actually kind of saving you as it goes. I will say I've dieted a few times into the summer, and it feels amazing because every day the trees blossom more, the birds are happier, the sun is out more, and it's warmer, and your diet kind of gets not as hard as it could have been towards the end. You also start your diet basically right after winter ends, which is like you're fluffier and you're so overeating all the food that you just don't give a shit. And it's easy to diet during that time. There's also nothing going on. And then my preferred method is to sort of slow gain during the summer, not getting too fat, do a short mini cut in the middle of the summer for like 2 weeks, cut all the fat you gained in the first month and a half, and then finish the last month and a half of summer again in a slow mass gain. Because a very slow mass gain keeps you nice and lean, but also allows you to eat food and have fun and lift hard. You don't want to maintain your whole summer. That's kind of insane. But you could, it's totally fine. But most people who are interested in long-term improvements, you're going to maintain for 12 weeks. That's for no reason at all. And then once, your summer is over, then what you can do is sort of take maybe an active rest or something like that, and then begin another bulk for winter, mini cut at some point during winter, bulk through the rest of the winter, maintain active rest, and then start another cut for the spring. That's kind of like the get fucked during summer bro periodization plan. I'll eventually have an RP video about that, but I think that's a sensible way to do things if you are very seasonally constrained. Most people that I deal with, competitive bodybuilders, they couldn't care what the hell was happening. Like the show must go on, and especially if you have a bodybuilding show, it changes everything because you're like every time they do the Arnold, all those people miss Thanksgiving dinner every year. It's too close for sure. Christmas dinner is out the window. That sucks, and regular people probably shouldn't do that. Also at RP, we're really just not big fans of dieting through the holidays. Like the way we see it is, the winter holidays. The way we see it is you have like 50 weeks of the year to diet hard other than those 2 weeks. Surely you can move your schedule around to not have to diet through those winter holidays. Yeah. So in any case, I think like that's what I just described, that whole circ annual plan is like a decent idea about at least sort of what could be a good trade-off between getting lean for the summer, but also recognize that winter is a shitty time to cut. So I think it kind of checks all those boxes.
Yeah, I didn't actually, it's just a funny anecdote about being kind of that cold exposure leading to more hunger. Whenever I just remember this as a child, going swimming and then always being like ravenous after swimming. Yeah. And I didn't know why. Like I remember it was the same thing with my sisters. They're always hungry and just ate a load of shit after swimming. But I didn't know there was actually like a physiological reason. I thought it was just like my like little kid self being like, oh yeah, I've exercised, now I'm hungry or something. Yes,
it's the cold water effect. Think about it this way: if you it was, let's say it was 32 degrees outside, and you did like 3 hours of pickup basketball, like many kids in the UK and the US do, when you come home, you're not exactly hungry. You're sweaty. You want a shower and a bunch of cold beverages. And after you have those, you're going to want to sit around a little while, relax, and then you're like, yeah, I could eat. But swimming, cold water effect is real, which is one of the reasons why, as a method of fat loss cardio, swimming has to be given a grain of salt. Because if it's swimming in a conventional pool that is a little colder, yes, the cold water effect is real, and it means that most people will want to at least eat back the calories. Whereas if you do the elliptical or incline walking or blah, 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 the rebound hunger effect is not as large typically. And that means that you can prescribe it to people with a more of a realistic hope of them actually being like, oh, well, I did the cardio, but I'm not super hungry. And then they stay on the plan.
I'm wondering if you can use that like during massing phases to actually help with hunger. Like, can I have a cold
Sure.
bath and see if that helps me like get through
Sure.
dinner?
There you go. That'll
To
be
see
a
if
fun
it
idea.
works. Someone asked, when are we going to see the training session with Nick Walker? Is that something you've got scheduled?
No.
No. It sounded like it was from the way they asked.
It did sound like it was. Yeah, that'd be cool. It'd be cool. I think Nick Walker has so much muscle that making him become debilitated and throw up during training should be very easy, or at least very straightforward. And he typically trains with pretty good technique, but we'll have ways of making sure his range of motion becomes rather extreme as far as compared to what he's used to, and that would be really fun. But it's interesting. People will ask or say things that are totally well meant, but the real world doesn't work like that. So, like, a lot of people will comment after I make some post or video, especially on Instagram, that say things like, "You need to go on Joe Rogan," and like, I think it's meant as in, it would be great to see you on Joe Rogan's podcast, and that I agree. But some people use even more particular words, like, "Why aren't you trying to get on Joe Rogan?" Like, I've literally had that before. Well, that's not something one tries to do. If you know anything about it, which we do, because we've had multiple colleagues get on there, Lane, Ethan Suplee, Joe Rogan contacts you, not the other way around. It has to be like that, because the entire world wants to get on the podcast. You won't simply hit him up somewhere and be like, "Hey, yo, bro, check it out." So it is funny that people will say stuff like that. And sometimes they'll be like, "Get Nick Walker on your channel." Like, well, you see, Nick Walker lives in the United States. It's a free country, and he's not compelled to do anything. So we'd have to offer him a good offer or convince him. Which we have to reach out to him or his people, wait in some sort of queue for him vetting who the hell is worth his time or not. He has his own very lucrative YouTube channel. His own people he trains with. He lives in a totally different part of the country. And at some point, it's like, oh yeah, we maybe could pull some strings to hopefully try to get him on. But at the end of the day, most of the people we get on the RP channel, there's people who really want to be on there. And if you really want to be on there, we'd love to have you on. And if you're really ultra famous, maybe we'll talk to you. And if with minimum effort, we could get you to come on, great. But so far on the channel, we haven't done this thing of like really beg elite pros to get on, because we can make high quality content that's educational and fun without the top pros altogether. And if they want to come on, that would be amazing and a super big treat. But it's not something that we spend too much time trying to do, because I think the alternative is just to get regular high talented bodybuilders on. And to us, that's at least at this juncture on the channel, that's good enough.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we pride ourselves on providing personalized service that will take your physique and knowledge to the next level. If you're interested, check the description and sign up.
Yeah, I much prefer that anyway. When, I don't know, it just always comes inauthentic when people try and, like, I don't know, beg a certain individual to do a podcast with them or come on. I don't know who does this, but if you were to do that, just be like, why? Like, do they really want to be doing that with you? Like, how much did you have to pay that person? Or
how much convincing do you have to do, and then why? Yeah, 100%.
Am I wrong? Did you recently launch something where people, if they want to come and have a session with you and maybe be on your YouTube channel, was that a recent thing you launched? I think I saw that recently.
Yeah. So the Team Full ROM folks and I were trying to figure out if we can potentially do something in Vegas, especially, and maybe potentially in Michigan, where people come through and we have like a couple of training groups with people where, like, it's myself and the Team Full ROM guys, and like a 3-to-1 ratio of us and other people that we're training, and they sort of get 2 hours of training, hard as fuck, in whatever training group you pick, with all of us around physically pushing you and giving you tech advice. And then after that, 2 hours of just like eating snacks post-workout and open Q&A. And I don't want to give away too many hints, but there's absolutely going to be something like this in the future with Revive in London. But we're trying to get good at that process and maybe do some experimenting in the USA before we bring it over across the seas. We've done this a trillion times in other capacities. We're not worried about the concept, but we are trying to get an accurate estimate of like, how much do people want to do this sort of thing? How much are they willing to pay to do it versus how much is like a crazy amount you would never charge anybody. And so we are absolutely getting into that sort of thing. And yes, there's a 99% chance that that session will be recorded for YouTube. So you can make the highlight reel of throwing up blood into your own eyes on the leg press, whatever people do during workouts.
I don't know why I didn't quite put two and two together that it was going to be a similar setup to what we've done with our London seminars. It makes complete sense. And I mean, I'm sure they're going to do really well. So if people are interested, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, oh, that sounds pretty good. Like there's a reason they always sell out when you guys come over here and we do them.
Sure.
So they're fantastic. So I know people are going to really enjoy that. So that's really cool.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. Yeah. And if you guys are interested, just go to Instagram, Team Full ROM. Just go right on the Instagram page, follow it, and then click through the links and it'll be in the links. So you can send us your email and you'll be the first person emailed with any kind of announcement. So you can jump on it early.
Fantastic. And like you said, the people keep their eyes open for the ones happening in London, in the UK at some point next year, because we're definitely going to be looking to throw some of those. But the next question is, should I be worried about obsessive behavior? They said, never skipping meals or workouts, but skipping social events.
I super like that this person is worried about obsessive behavior, which is two psychopathies fighting one another. It's hilarious. Yeah, and a lot of them come from the same root of personality traits. So if someone's prone to obsessive behavior, is greater than 50% chance they're also prone to worrying about it. So I would say it's actually a real simple solution to all this. The psychology is quite deep and not much nuance, but I'd say the easiest thing to ask yourself is, for the long-term value that you feel like you're getting out of your investment in sport, is skipping social events, but logging all of your meals worth it to you? So the way I have easy analogy is, what you're doing with your body when you're training is you're building the ultimate, war machine android, for example. Right? You're a professor in a lab and you're gluing his chest plate on and making sure the nuclear reactor is all tuned. Something you do with a screwdriver, of course. That's how you fix all androids. People are like, hey, Steve, you're going to come to this New Year's party, but the android's going through like engine testing and like he's putting out crazy petajoules, and you're like, oh, this is too good. Yeah, listen, there's many New Years ahead. I'll join up with you next time you crank on that android for a while, because you're building something amazing. You're building something beautiful. You're building an accomplishment. You're building something that takes years to construct. And first of all, the construction is super, super awesome as an experience, a deep experience of investment and construction that you made yourself. And also the end product is ostensibly very good that you're super proud of. Maybe a more benign analogy would be like, if you're familiar with supercars, the Koenigsegg brand of supercars from Sweden, as each one costs like $1.5 million to buy. Because all the cars sell out before they ever go out, because as soon as they announce they're going to build a new car, the list fills up with rich ass motherfuckers from Kuwait. I want one. I want the 5th one ever made, because I just wasn't around for the first 4. And so you tell, how many, and Koenigsegg is actually the name of the designer, how many friendship gatherings and parties did he meet, literally tinkering with his, unbelievably successful multi-million-dollar a year business, life's work of supercars. Yeah, fuckload. Was it worth it to him? Of course it was fucking worth it. You can ask him. He'd be like, he might not even understand the question. Like, all that time you spent in the garage tinkering with cars, do you wish you were like going up and down roller coasters in Sweden's best park? He'd be like, what? This is paradise to me. So the only question I have for the person asking this to come back is, all of that foregone opportunity, are you doing it in an affirmative way or in a negative way? When someone's like, hey, like, you want to go out with us? Or are you really just going to like do your macros bullshit? If you're like, I'm going to do my macros bullshit and I love it. Like, I would skip I hardly went out at all when I was a grad student. So I was busy doing research and busy writing my thesis and doctoral stuff. And I was busy in the gym, cranking away and eating my meals. I just didn't have a lot of it. But if people are like, do you feel like you're missing something? This kind of kidding me. I'm creating the most beautiful things I've ever built. I never thought I was missing something. It never felt bad to me. It wasn't a trade-off that was very difficult to do. And then in that regard, it's super fucking healthy and awesome. It's amazing, right? But on the other hand, if you are coming from a top-down perspective, this isn't you, the originator, going, I'm building the world's greatest machine. If it's like, well, I have to do these things and I have to stay home and I don't want to, but I have to. You just think down that line of, are you building something that's at least worthwhile, that'll really be awesome? And if you're like, I don't know, well, then you go out with your friends, Jesus Christ. Because, it could just be a shitty hobby. Like, if someone put me in a fucking basement, was like, make art, like, here's these fucking pastel paints, I'd be like, this is awful. I'd rather go get high on weed with my friends. It's dumb as shit. They're like, but you could be a great artist. Be like, fuck that. I don't like that shit. Art's dumb. Get out of my face. Totally valid. And also anything in between is valid. So like, if there's an event you want to go to with your friends that's once every 2 weeks, and you make it once a month, great. Because every 2 weeks would be too much for you, and you really just want to get some more sleep and get a good leg workout. But every now and again, it's worth it. So these things aren't things to fret over. They're things for you. There's total commitment to the plan and zero friends. You disown your parents. And then there's a zero plan. You're just a social butterfly, Hugh Hefner. There's whatever answer in between these, which could change for you on a weekly or monthly basis. Whichever level of dedication, the costs are lower than the benefits, that's what you pick. And it just requires some soul searching and some namaste shit. And you could even make a mistake. You could say, I've searched my soul, and I know that if I go out with my friends tonight, I'll be happier in the long run than if I don't. You go out with your friends, and an hour in, you're like, God damn it, I hate it here. These people are fucking drunk and annoying. I don't even want to drink because it's stupid. It feels like fucking poison. I'm going to go home and write out my next motorcycle and go to sleep early. And then I'm going to wake up and crush this fucking arms workout. Well, there's your answer. So next time someone's like, do you want to go out? You'll remember that in the back of your head. Be like, nah, last time didn't go so well. Fuck that. You skip another 3 or 4 times. And then you get really thirsty for going out. And then you go out once every 5 or 6. So your equilibrium point at that time in your life is every 5 or 6 opportunities to hang out. You go hang out. That's how I do my life. Like, my wife and I are going on vacation here in a few days and up to the north of Michigan, which are pretty. It's not exactly the best bodybuilding environment, but we all rarely go on vacation. So for me, every now and again, it's totally great. But after 2 or 3 days, I'll be like, let's get the fuck out of here. I need my science shit back home and my private gym and all this other stuff. So it's all about a trade-off. There's no reason to worry about any of us. None of that requires worry at all. So take your worry, throw it away. Take your attention to detail. It's like super, super serious, and ask, like, how interested am I in doing this versus how interested am I in going out? And you can do that every time. Every time people ask you to go out, you can just envision, be like, okay, hold on. Last time I went out, how to go, how interested am I in it, blah, blah, blah. And if you have better things to do with your time than go out, which includes sitting at home and counting macros or whatever the alternative is, then absolutely do it. And as soon as you feel like, oh man, I'm really missing out, hey, next time somebody asks you, go out, see if you're really missing out. Because if you go out and blows dick, well, then that just adds up to, because again, in grad school, in undergrad, I tried to go out of a little bit more thinking I'm the going out type, but I just wasn't. I was like, fuck that. So I just pulled out of the whole thing for a long time. It was a long time of great personal development. And then eventually I established more of equilibrium. I go out a little bit more than normal. I still work a ton. And then for me, that was great for a while. And then I realized it's always a floating equilibrium that you can always meet at any point. Just be honest with yourself and do anything stupid in which, if you're going out and you know it's the wrong place to be, get out. And if you are at home and you know you'd rather be out, call for friends and be like, where are you at? And just go. Because you're in charge of your own life, and do things that are in the net positive. Invest in your current and in your future. Seeing all of that together at the same time, you can make a decent comparison. You can even be wrong every now and again, but you won't be wrong for long because you like what you like. And as you age, I've typically found that you like what you like a lot more, and you like everything else a lot less. So it becomes more and more clear how you want to spend your time.
I couldn't have said it. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. I couldn't have said it. That was fantastic. I think a lot of people, especially like the younger people I end up interacting with, have that kind of, they don't want to get like, they feel like almost two extremes. Like they see these hyper-focused bodybuilders. They're like, oh, I should be like that if I want good results. But then they see like, I don't know, some of their friends in their corner or their family that are just like quote unquote normal. And they're like, oh, I want to be normal, but I want to be like this. And then they're like pushing and throwing. So it's like you said, kind of think about it. What brings you happiness and joy. And it's okay. I've even found myself sometimes like, oh, I should be more social. I'm like, yeah, but actually I just really like being on my own and doing this,
right,
like whatever
100%.
It is. So, and like you said, it can fluctuate and you can learn in terms of like what you enjoy and what brings you joy, because yeah, there might be times where you're like, oh, actually, this is actually really good. So it's good to experiment now and then.
Totally.
Awesome. So the next question is, why do we not seem to see you, Mike, grinding out reps very often?
2 reasons. One, I tend to fail pretty quickly. So my close to failure looks a lot similar than my going all the way to failure. One of those reasons is I almost always intentionally cap my movement speed. So the way that people try to estimate failure is the decline in concentric velocity. but most of my shit, I'm trying to stay so safe and controlled that I cap my concentric velocity at maybe about half of what I could do from rep 1. And thus, typically there would be 4 reps of slowing down until you hit failure. But for me, since I'm already most of the way slowed down, maybe the last rep or 2 would be slowed down. So people see me slowing down a tiny bit, and then I stop, and they're like, what the hell was that? You just started at 4 RIR. Well, for me, that's 2 RIR. 2 RIR is the average of what I train to. I've also been playing around lately with times of grinding it to failure or very close, and other times of not ever really going beyond 2 RIR. And I can't say I'm overly convinced that failure is such a good idea. I go very close to failure oftentimes on like biceps and stuff like that, which muscles I know can handle a shitload of fatigue and they need all the stimulus they can get. But quads and shit like that, if I'm 2 reps in reserve, I just get weeks and weeks and weeks of consistent, amazing, steady growth and progression. If I grind real close to failure, I get so much fatigue and so much local tissue disruption that the next session doesn't even go that well. And I have to do a deload or half a week. And I'm like, what the fuck? At some point, failure training, ultra close failure training for me is really more about showing off. And I think most people that like to train to failure understand that intuitively. It's a psychological thing. It's like you against your willpower and the machine thing, and it's fun. Very few people ask the question of, is it a good idea in general? And I would say every now and again, failure training is critical because it tells you how realistic your RIRs are. But if I go close 1 RIR, 0 RIR once a month, I go to actual failure on some exercises once every 2 months, but I post an average of 2 training videos per muscle group per week. It's very easy to get the accurate representation that I rarely go to failure because I do. Yeah, that's it. And if I feel that I'm not going close to failure enough, I go closer to failure. For example, on some squats last week for the new Atlantis machine, I did a set of 15 reps, first set, racked it. It's like, man, I was lying to myself. That wasn't, typically I go 15, 13, 11, 9, because I lose a lot between sets. But I was like, man, I was sandbagging. So instead of doing 13, I did 14 reps set after. Instead of doing 12 after that, I did 13 and then 11 and then 10. And by the last sets, I was like, my quads are fucked. But it was because I was like, no. I'm sandbagging and I'm going to grind a little harder. And I think people forget that you can always go a little harder on the sets afterwards. You still don't have to go at all-out failure. You can still get an unbelievably good workout. So that's the situation.
Yeah. It's someone I recently posted up it was a set of hacks or whatever, and I basically posted it was like 3, 2, 1 RIR and like 0 RIR, and I then racked or whatever, and like it was absolutely not RIR. And someone posted like, why didn't you just go for the last rep and just like, if you missed it, you missed it. And I was just like, because like the risk versus reward and the fatigue of like trying, I'd have to have really tried. There's no point me just going and like giving up. I'd have to really try, and then not to get it. Like even the not, like you just said, the 1 to 0 RIR reps, like on something like a hacks was just destroys you. So it would have just wrecked the entire session basically if I tried it.
So first of all, you're asking the great question of what is the benefit, and there seems to be no benefit. What about the downside, Steve? What are you going to do? Have you ever been pinned in a half squat? I actually would not know what to do. I try to shimmy a little bit and then poop my way out. Yeah. But like if one leg comes out and the other doesn't, and the machine still has traction to go down, it's a career-ending injury. Fuck me getting stuck in any kind of goddamn machine because I have some ego problems. Like, fuck that. Because somewhere I go really close to failure a lot is walking lunges. And like, you go to fail on walking lunges with no weight, you just fall and nothing bad happens. Yeah. But it's so goddamn brutal and painful. I don't see a lot of people doing that because at the end of the day, I think they want to go to failure against some like mythical load and really just really grind it in. And that's all good and well. But you have to ask yourself what part of your training is mindless psychology of being masculine versus a scientifically good idea to do to get jacked. Yeah. And if you want to be masculine or whatever, go do MMA. Just kidding. You could do bodybuilding and do that. Just be intelligent about making the right kind of trade-offs.
Yeah, and I always think, like we even know this from the research, more well-trained individuals are particularly good at like rating their reps in reserve, and then also the closer you get to failure, the better you are at it. So like someone knows if they're at like 0 to 1, and the benefits of like, oh, you could have done 1 more, whatever. Like the benefits versus risk reward, like you said, it just outweighs every time. So
yeah. Well, with the way we do progressions, you and I, even if you don't get close to failure as much as you wanted on 1 week, you just put 5 pounds on the bar or add 1 rep, and next week you have to match the reps or even go one more beyond. And then you're really close to failure, and you just keep doing that. Unless you're sandbagging and pretending you can't hit PRs, it's not going to work. So if you're very close to failure and you're very driven to hit good high technique PRs, eventually you will get close to failure anyway.
Yeah. I think that's what people miss as well. It's like, well, if you're progressing like you start 3 RAR, 3-4 RAR, like every mesocycle that should be improving. And like by the end of the mesocycle, you should be improving versus the last week and the one before. So whatever you're doing, you're in proximity to failure because you're improving. You wouldn't be otherwise. So
100%. People treat training as like a one time. I'm just training once and I want to have that session.
Time for one more question?
One more.
So they said, why is the recommended range 5 to 30 reps? What happened for hypertrophy? What happens at rep 4 or rep 31?
Yeah. Cancer instantly at rep 4, and actually lightning hits you at rep 31. I know some biological disease. That's not true. So the shorter answer is very good. So basically anything north of 30 reps is still quite effective for hypertrophy, but it starts to fall off, right? So like we have this graph we can draw where it's hypertrophy effect. 1 rep here goes up like this to 5, and then it roughly flatlines, and at 30, it roughly starts to fall back down. But it's all a curve. So 4 is great. It just might not be as great as 6. And sometimes it's even better, but not as often as it's worse. 3 is, I just wish I could do a few more reps. 2, oh man, it's just a lot of bone and joint pain and not a lot of anything else. So this not magic numbers. 5 to 30 is like roughly, what is a good idea to do. And there are certainly boundary conditions, any analogy here works. Like how big does a burrito have to be to satisfy a customer? Well, if it's a really, really small burrito, it's just going to satisfy fewer customers. But if you get a Japanese girl to come in, she might be the biggest burrito she's ever seen. Are we still talking about burritos? But because she weighs 90 pounds, and for her, 50 calories of food is like a lot of food or something. Whereas if you have like an dock worker in it, some guy from the Midlands or the North, those barely human English people, Steve, he could have a burrito that's 12 pounds in size, and he could just eat it and it'd be great. But like if you sell a 12-pound burrito, most people would be like, that's insane. I don't want to buy that. So the range of burrito sizes in the industry consider like something most people would benefit from. Similar idea from the 5 to 30 reps. Are there times where you can benefit from 4 and even 3 reps? Totally. But there's just aren't something to depend on nearly as much as the 5 to 30. And 32 reps, sweet, awesome, amazingly hypertrophic, but a little less hypertrophic in the average time you would try than maybe 28 reps or something like that. So just thinking of like that in terms of like rough amounts, which is funny, right? Because I get the same question in a different way. I'll do like pull-ups, 6, 5, 4, 4 reps, and be like, 4 reps, isn't that not hypertrophic, Dr. Mike? And I'm like, oh my fucking
switches
God.
off.
It's just off completely. Like on average, yes, but in this circumstance, it's working really great for me because the pull-up eccentric is so long anyway that 4 reps on a pull-up is really the same time under tension as like a set of 10 in a pull down, which is totally fine. So.
Yeah. Fantastic. Mike, thank you so much for this again. I'll make sure everyone can kind of check out Team for Rum. Hopefully they're already following you guys and following the YouTube channel and kind of seeing all the action over there and following you over on Instagram. But yeah, thank you so much for this, and we'll catch you very soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Take care.
So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.